The movie Oppenheimer is based on a true story. If told in chronological order, the story would not be interesting, but the writers of this movie used some tricks to make the story more engaging. The first is framing. In the film, there are three major timelines: Strauss's Senate hearing, which happens furthest in the future, Oppenheimer's security hearing, which happens before that, and the general past, which covers many years, most of which precedes the two hearings. The story is told out of order, and it uses these three timelines to frame different topics that are discussed. For example, in Oppie's hearing, he was asked if he was happy in Europe, and he said no. The question frames the following flashback of Oppie in Europe. When he mentioned meeting Robbie in the hearing, it cut to the past. When he mentioned teaching at Caltech and Berkeley in the hearing, the movie cut to the past. Sometimes it goes the opposite way. In the past, Opp explained to Groves that he knew he was hired because of his communist ties. In the hearing, Groves is then asked if he knew about Oppie's communism, to which he confirms. Sometimes it's used to show that someone is lying. In the hearing, Opp is asked why he tried to deny the hydrogen bomb in Strauss's meeting. Opp denies this, but a flashback to the meeting shows that he wanted to have Truman limit the spread of atomic weapons rather than using the H-bomb. Opp is later asked about how he used his status to influence atomic policy. Opp denies this, but a flashback shows Oppie in a hearing about isotopes against Strauss, which contradicts his denial. Oppenheimer is based on a true story, so there are a lot of complicated details, but this type of framing allows the story to deliver quick exposition before showing us a story from the past. By telling the audience what the upcoming scene is about, it ensures that they aren't lost in all of the events. The second trick is callbacks. At the start of the movie, Strauss and the aide are talking about Oppie's security hearing, and Strauss says, "Who want to justify their whole life?" At the end of the scene, when Strauss doesn't want to discuss Oppenheimer in his own hearing, the aide repeats the quote back to him. This callback highlights how Opp's security hearing and Strauss's Senate hearing parallel each other. When Oppenheimer meets Bohr, he tells him, "You can lift the stone without being ready for the snake that's revealed." This was about Bohr's updated answer, but later when Oppie is working on the bomb, the quote is recontextualized. When Bohr warns him of the danger of the bomb, Oppie repeats the quote. The first time, it was about Opp being ready to think. The second time, it was about whether Opp was ready for the consequences of the A-bomb. Opp calls Strauss a lowly shoe salesman in their first meeting, but Strauss removes the lowly. When Strauss is on the edge of defeat towards the end of the movie, he says he'll go back to being a lowly shoe salesman. The first quote was when Strauss was confident as the chairman of the AEC, which was why he denied lowly. The second quote was when he was about to lose his position, showing his decline in confidence. When Opp was teaching about how light being a particle in a wave was paradoxical, he said theory will only take you so far. Later, when the atom is split, Opp uses theory to prove that it's impossible, but when it's done, Lawrence says the same theory quote. When working on the bomb, Teller does calculations that reveal that the bomb might create a chain reaction that burns the atmosphere. The chances are near zero, but the theory quote is repeated. These callbacks don't recontextualize, but reaffirm the truth of the quote. Strauss said, "Why get caught holding the knife yourself?" when explaining why Borden would go to the FBI to get to the AEC instead of going directly. Later, the aide discovers that Strauss helped Borden take down Oppie, and he repeated the quote. The Senate aide saying it back is used to show that he began to understand how Strauss operated. Early in the movie, the aide told Strauss, "This is how the game is played," to comfort him and explain that the hearing was just a formality. After the Borden reveal, Strauss repeats the quote back to the aide. The first quote made Strauss seem defenseless and the hearing harmless. The second quote recontextualized Strauss as cunning and the hearing as a threat. When Oppie was banging Jean, he read a Sanskrit book that said, "And now I am become death." When the first atomic bomb successfully blew up, he repeated the quote. The first time, it lacked any true meaning, but the second time, it symbolized his perspective on the bomb. In general, callbacks reward the audience for paying attention, but some of these callbacks have additional layers, like recontextualizing the meaning of a quote or showing a change in the status quo. Third is cross-cutting. The Pash scene has great use of this technique. One scene is about Pash interrogating Oppenheimer about the potential communist scientists and their ranks, while the other is a scene in the future with Groves explaining to Oppie how dangerous Pash is. As Pash begins to grill Oppie more, the story Groves tells about Pash gets more ruthless. The scenes intercut together makes Pash's interrogation more intense. Borden attacking Oppenheimer in the security hearing and Teller defending Strauss in the Senate hearing are intercut to double the effect of Strauss gaining ground. In contrast, Bush defending Oppie in the interrogation and Hill attacking Strauss in the Senate are intercut to double Strauss's loss. This movie intercuts similar or relevant scenes together to enhance the power of both scenes. It is also an effective tool to speed up pacing. In the Pash example, We didn't need a scene leading to Oppenheimer discussing Pash with Groves. The story is allowed to jump right into the conversation because it's being intercut with a more important scene that had been built up. The fourth trick is playing with the timeline for specific results. Towards the start of the movie, a flashback of Oppie and Strauss's first meeting has the scientist looking down on the AEC member. Then, Opp tells Einstein something, and it causes him to ignore Strauss. The chairman thought Oppenheimer turned Einstein against him. Towards the end of the movie, Strauss is convinced that's what happened, but the aide says they might not have even talked about him. What actually happened is finally revealed, and it was about how the bomb destroyed the world, not Strauss. The depressing conversation likely led to Einstein's cold encounter. The way the timeline was cut made this a mystery. When Strauss is asked why he opposed Oppenheimer, he says it wasn't him, but Borden. Borden mysteriously got security files that he wouldn't have been capable of getting. Strauss says that someone might have given them to him, but as the story unravels, it's revealed that Strauss worked with Nichols and Borden to take Oppie down. Strauss gave Borden the files. The cutting of the timeline made this a mystery. In the security hearing, Groves is asked if he would clear Oppie under the current guidelines. Right after, there is a scene of Lawrence, a friend of Oppie, joining Los Alamos and immediately disobeying Groves' security orders, implying the clearance answer is no. Tellers asks the same question later and his answer is also concealed. The answers to this question remain a mystery for most of the movie to build up anticipation for their reveals. After Teller sided with Strauss in the Senate, his answer to the security question is given. He thinks Oppie is a security risk. Groves follows, saying he wouldn't clear him under the current guidelines, but he also defends Oppie by saying that he wouldn't have cleared anyone else either, and says that he doesn't question Oppie's loyalty. These two answers are played side by side to juxtapose each other. During an advisory meeting, Nichols brings up Jean Tatlock and the Chevalier incident to discredit Oppie. At this point, it was established that Jean was a communist, but the Chevalier incident was more mysterious. Earlier in the movie, Chevalier offered to pass scientific info from Opp to the Russians, but Oppie denied it and didn't report him. The actual incident came later. It was when Pash interrogated Oppie, and the latter tried to protect Chevalier and give up another communist by giving Pash a BS story. Once again, the editing created a mystery. In the Chevalier incident, a scene from the past has Groves asking Oppie to give him the name of the person he was defending in order for Groves to protect Oppie. Opp refuses. In the security hearing from the future, Pash reveals that he was relocated before Oppie gave up the name. The person who relocated him was Groves. This reveal showed that even though Opp didn't give up the name, Groves protected him from Pash, creating a satisfying payoff. Stomping is played as a background noise and sometimes briefly cut to, like in the discussion of the hydrogen bomb with Strauss. It usually comes up with discussions about bombs and how they should be used. It's unclear why stomping is used and what it means until the actual stomping scene appears. The stomping was people cheering for Oppie after the successful bombing of Japan, but during the speech, he started to regret his actions, shown by horrifying hallucinations mid-speech. This gives the stomping meaning on rewatch, but on the first watch, it's a small mystery. By editing the timeline, the movie is able to create these subplots that end with cathartic payoffs. What did Oppie say to Einstein to sour him on Strauss? How did Borden get the files? Will Groves and Teller defend Opp? How did Oppie deal with Pash? Some of these subplots are paused and then returned to, and then some of them happen in a sequence of scenes. Fifth is some payoffs that would have happened regardless due to chronology, but I still believe they enhance the film, so I'll mention them. The Hill subplot is the first. When there's a petition to stop the Japan bombing, Oppie is asked to join, but he refuses, slapping the board out of Hill's hand. We would naturally assume that Hill didn't like that. Strauss adds onto this by saying that Hill was furious that Oppenheimer didn't help the petition when he could have. Now, he'll be in the Senate hearing and is likely to go against Oppie. The epic plot twist is that despite what Oppie did, Hill opposes Strauss because of all of the evidence that he gathered that painted Strauss as vindictive, like the unfair security hearing. The subversion resulted in a highlight of the movie. A smaller payoff is Oppie meeting Heisenberg. We see it happen in the past. Then when he's asked in the hearing if they ever met again, Oppie's answer about crossing paths is kind of vague. Later, we learn that the Germans had a massive head start on building a bomb because of their lead scientist, Heisenberg. The two crossed paths in a race to build an atomic bomb for their nations. Using the timeline to frame events, scrambling the timeline to create better subplots, interesting callbacks, cross-cutting, and payoffs are the editing tricks that elevated Oppenheimer. 3 out of 5 of these techniques involve playing with time. The movie showed me how playing with the timeline of events can enhance the entertainment of a story in unique ways. Some of these edits resulted in scenes just as exciting as cool action scenes in a superhero movie.